Hello, everybody. Welcome to the IC Topic Chats for today. It's August 10th, 2023. We've been doing this for a little over 3 years, guys, and I'm super pleased to invite a couple of people who I work with on a regular basis, sometimes too regularly, which is probably, maybe it's a good thing. I don't know, right? Emily Johnson is our Goshen Consulting office manager. And I work with her all day, every day, and she's always got great questions for me, and she keeps me on track. And then we have Katie Zitt with she is our QuickBooks support. She has her own consulting practice. In fact, she runs a business not unlike a lot of the consulting practices we operate, but she's specifically around QuickBooks online support. And actually, I'm gonna, before we get too far into this conversation today about QuickBooks support, I feel like maybe each one of you guys might want to give a little bit more introduction to yourself. So Emily, why don't you share a little bit about who you are and what you do for Goshen, and then I'll hand it over to Katie, and then we can launch into the conversation about QuickBooks support. And Katie, make sure you say the name of your company exactly the way I was supposed to remember to put it, but I'm sure I said it wrong. But go ahead, Emily.
Guys, my name's Emily, and I am the office manager, as Matt said. A lot of my work revolves around accounting and QuickBooks here at Goshen. I do a lot of coding for a lot of the expenses that come into QuickBooks. The bank accounts are automatically matched up with QuickBooks. So all the expenses come in and I code them. I do a lot of the bank reconciliations and month-end closes. I invoice on QuickBooks. Just a lot of work on QuickBooks in general. So yeah, I have worked closely with Katie, and she has taught me a lot, and I've come a little ways in learning. So yeah, I'll let Katie introduce herself now.
Hello, all. I'm Katie Zitt. My business name is just my name, Katie Zitt. I am a CPA and an advanced certified QuickBooks Online Pro Advisor. I came to accounting in a kind of weird way. My undergraduate degree is in philosophy, and when I graduated, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I had used QuickBooks before, so I started working for an accounting firm that did audit, tax, payroll, and so I started working there, and I found that I loved accounting, oddly enough. And so I went back to night school, and I got the courses that I needed and sat for the CPA exam. And so I've been working in accounting ever since, so maybe 15 years or so.
And Katie, you also do jazz singing, right?
I do, yes. When I was we lived in Cincinnati for a number of years, and there was a jazz pianist who owned his own little club a couple blocks from where we lived. So I would sing jazz there. And now I'm working on a project with a musician, Mel Parker, and we're going to try to start singing at wineries. So,
well, thanks for that. I'm sorry to throw out some of your personal stuff like that.
Sure, absolutely.
You guys know how it is. We're all consultants. A lot of us work in one person operations, and so our colleagues are many times our clients are, and so I feel like that way around Katie. She's kind of just an extension of our staff in so many ways. So my business partner and I have met with her and her partner as well, and we have had dinner, and so it's kind of fun. And so we have actually, I'll give you a little story. So I'm just going to set up the story of how Katie came to support Goshen Consulting. As a lot of you guys know, Goshen has had a lot of new programs start. One of them is a program called STEM Camp, which supports military connected school districts across the country. We have 10 camps each summer across the country, and it's a big operation. It's about $1 million a year, which is a lot of money. At least for me, it is. I know not for some of the bigger operations, but we were running about $100,000 per year in operations, and we kind of shot for the fences, and we hit that home run, to use a baseball reference. And a lot of things changed very quickly. I've been using QuickBooks for a number of years, and I was doing everything I could to keep it together. I had to open up new checking accounts, and I had to create new accounts and put things together. And I I worked for a financial services firm once upon a time. That wasn't exactly, I don't have a degree in accounting or anything, but I knew enough about how to manage my books to keep receipt for everything, and being able to track every expense back to its source and things like that. But frankly, I got a little in over my head. Separate from that, my partner, who also happens to be my wife, worked for an organization in St. Louis where Katie also worked. Katie left that organization. My partner also did. And so they had a personal, professional relationship, much like I was talking about, and just got along famously. And so, the word got out that I needed help, and I didn't know where to go. And I was completely in over my head with the way the accounting was happening. And we were getting ready to do our first audit. And so, Kristen called in a favor from Katie, and Katie was like, I'm not so sure I want to work with you, which is great. She's very good about making sure she's able to support somebody and not do something that's over and above her head. But I put in a request, and she took a look, and we had a phone call. And so you've been working with us for about a year and a half, maybe 14 months, something like that now. Is that about right, Katie?
I'm thinking, was it last maybe November, or was it before that?
No, I believe we started working together last
October.
Summer, at least a year. So anyway, and Emily, as I was saying, is our office manager. She came to work with us in June 2022, and I literally brought her in, and I handed her an envelope of cash each day to just come in and just do some things for me, because I got to get some work done. And she was like very happy to do that. I said, don't worry, I gave her $100 a day. Come in for a day, here's $100. And so I convinced her to leave her other job and come work for us. And so the three of us have been kind of like the accounting pros. We have a fourth person who does our work for a local accounting firm, and he's the official accountant, external accountant. The rest of the three of us are kind of like the internal accounting team that works through all things Goshen, but also all things STEM camp in preparation for an audit. We went through that process last year. Luckily, didn't have to do it for various reasons, but now we're prepared to do it again this year. And so we have our books in a lot better shape because of all of that. So anyway, I know Katie wanted to share kind of her approach to talking about how she supports people, and maybe thinking about how she can use this as a reference to talking about how she supported Goshen in our operation. And so I sent out a link, but I guess I'll pass it back to you, Katie, to talk through your approach. And then we have a number of questions that we each kind of posed in our own private little Google file that we will go through, and we'll do some of that. And at a certain point, we'll just open it up for everybody to ask questions about all things accounting, QuickBooks Online, why you would ever want to use it or not, and expenses and things like that. So go ahead, Katie. I'll stop talking.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let's see. I think Matt sent out a link for what I'm sharing here.
And it's right there in the chat. I just sent it again.
Perfect. So this is QuickBooks Sample Company, and you can access this anytime, and you can make changes in this sample company and test out features. And then when you go to open it again, it resets and starts over. This particular version is the QuickBooks Pro subscription level. If you Google QuickBooks Test Drive, there's a link, and you can actually get into, there's also a link to QuickBooks Online Advanced. It's a more robust version of QuickBooks. It's kind of more like enterprise level. So people usually start with either QuickBooks Essentials or QuickBooks Plus. Again, this is the Plus version. So it has a number of features that like the Essentials and the Simple Start do not. So anyway, I wanted to just kind of give you a little overview of QuickBooks Online, and also my philosophy and approach to teaching people how to use it. So my whole approach is sort of a financial statement based approach that, you know, instead of just going in and teaching someone how to code things or understanding the different modules within QuickBooks, I, from the very start, want to show how each thing that you do affects the financial statements. So when you're in QuickBooks Online and you go to reports, see if it loads quickly here. So the two main reports would be the profit and loss and the balance sheet. The balance sheet obviously is the big picture assets and liabilities for a company, your checking accounts, your accounts receivable if you're on an accrual basis, your loans, your accounts payable, again, if you're on an accrual basis. And then the other main report would be the profit and loss. I will go back here. And this is the profit and loss statement. So this is your income and expense. The balance sheet is sort of a snapshot in time of where your assets, liability, and equity are at. The profit and loss statement looks at activity over a range of time. And so like this in particular is saying this year to date. So you can see here's the date range, and these are all these little blue things are links. So whenever I'm showing someone how to use QuickBooks Online, I will show them a feature of where to code things and then have them drill down into the financials and look and see. So like when you click on this net income here, you get a total detailed report of everything in that range. So I'll just give you an example of how I might show someone how to code things. So there's this module, the banking module, and the way the banking module works is you link your bank accounts directly to QuickBooks. There's a little bit of a difference between QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop here because with QuickBooks Online, all of the bank links are free, but I don't know how many are paid version for QuickBooks Desktop, but many banking institutions will not let you directly sync for free. So I would say that's a major advantage of QuickBooks Online. Anyway, so these little cards are in this sample company, all of the different links. So they've got a checking account, a savings account, and a MasterCard account. So if I were trying to teach someone how to use QuickBooks Online, down here is sort of the repository of transactions that have been brought in from the bank that are not yet in QuickBooks. So I'll just pick one for an example. So I'll do an outflow. So you've got money out, money in. So let's just say we were going to look at this A rental. This was on 8/10/2023. You always put the name of the payee in. That's a way to use QuickBooks Online on a comprehensive basis. This one didn't have that vendor, so I'm just adding it on the fly. And then what I want to show you is I'll pick something. This is, I don't know, it's probably a rental car or something like that. But okay, let's say I accidentally coded it to gas and electric. And then I go in and I add it. Well, then at this point, instead of just going and coding, I want to drill down and I want to understand where did that end up on the financial statements. So I go back to my reports and I go into my profit and loss because that was a profit and loss or an income statement account that we picked. And I'm like, oh shoot, I don't know, I don't remember which one. So I could go and I could drill down and I could look at all the detail, or I could be like, oh wait, I think I accidentally coded that to gas and electric. So then I would click in here.
So let me just pause you real quick for the
Yep.
folks who are watching. How many people, just kind of by way of giving a thumbs up, how many people are familiar with QuickBooks? Sorta, Jillian, Billion.
Not super familiar. I just started using it like 2 months ago.
Yeah, one of the things that she just showed that I think is super impressive, that just seems like, it's not even the sort of thing that I think Katie's even gonna think to tell you about, but it's like blows my mind, is that I can connect QuickBooks directly to my bank and all of my bank transactions populate. Like, is that just like obvious? Like it should happen, but when it happens and it's there, you're like, whoa, because once upon a time, I manually typed everything into QuickBooks on my PC before it was online. But I know that just seems like a minor thing, Katie, but that's just like one of those little things where you can't get, QuickBooks isn't gonna do everything for you. You still have to
Right.
do some interaction, and that's what she's showing you here, but it's amazing to me that I mean, we have, I don't know, several $100,000 in credit card charges each year on STEM camp, because that's just what it costs to do business. And it all gets populated into here, and that's a lot of what Emily does. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure. No, that's absolutely true. And that's why I really like the QuickBooks Online, since it's a free import. It's a huge advantage. Just going back to this little example here. So I've drilled down and I see, okay, there's that A rental block that I coded incorrectly. I drill in there and it pops the transaction back up, and I can go in and I might say, okay, do they have, what are their auto categories? Maybe they have rental, or maybe that was a travel. I was probably travel. So I'd go in and I'd recode the travel, save and close, and then it brings me back to the drilled down financial statements. This is actually, this is not the usual view that I look at. QuickBooks is always changing and improving. And like right now, we're seeing the modern view. I like the classic view. This is what I'm most familiar with. But this modern view, they're taking it in a direction where you can sort of do more sorting within the actual software, as opposed to like exporting it to Excel and doing your analysis there. So they're coming up with these new views. For now, I like the classic view. I might get sold on the new modern view. So anyway, so that would be an example of how I would teach someone how to understand how like the coding and the banking module relates to the financial statements. The banking module is just one example of many modules that are in QuickBooks. There is, within the sales module, there's obviously invoicing and receiving payments. The expense module, there's like a vendor center where you can see everything that's been coded. There are some pitfalls that a lot of business owners run into, that they don't realize that when they're in this screen, if they don't pick a payee name, that information is not going to end up in the vendor center, because the vendor center is driven by these payee names. So that, I would say, that's a very common pitfall for people that just first start using QuickBooks Online. Anyway, so that's kind of my approach. I will say that there's a lot of nuance in accounting, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with cash basis versus accrual basis. Accrual basis accounting recognizes income and expense when the service is performed. For example, if you have a utility bill that was for the month of July, but you didn't pay it until August, when you enter the bill in QuickBooks on an accrual basis, you want to enter it in July so that it's a July expense. On a cash basis, expenses are recognized when you pay them. So let's say you put a bill in QuickBooks and you dated the bill in July, but you didn't pay it until August. Then on a cash basis, that would show up as an August expense. Most small business owners are on a cash basis. I think that's another sort of component, that if someone's on an accrual basis, I can teach them an accrual method of accounting versus the cash basis method. So I don't know, should we open it up for questions now, or should I keep kind of giving more of an overview of QuickBooks? What would be
I want to give Emily a chance to pipe in and talk a little bit about her experience with QuickBooks, and then maybe we can answer a couple of the questions that we have that we posted to one another, and then we can open it up to questions from the rest of the crowd. But basically what Katie just did was kind of walk you through how you use it. I mean, from my perspective, the main reason I'm using it is for, monitoring my expenses, thinking through, where those expenses go, preparation for annual taxes. I also use the payroll function, which is something we can talk about, but and you know, for the mainly it's just it's a way to manage my finances in a way that's more organized than an Excel spreadsheet. That's where it started, but it's become a lot more than that because I have a lot of other people and a lot of more responsibility than I started with. Emily, why don't you share your experiences? And I think I just did a backstory to Emily. When she came to work for us, she had literally zero experience with QuickBooks and this whole thing. No, I'm wrong. No, you had experience with QuickBooks, not QuickBooks Online though, right? So why don't you share your experiences with QuickBooks, what it was like learning Goshen's experience, Goshen's books, and what it was like working with Katie. So why don't I be quiet and just tell us what you want to talk about?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I did have a little bit of prior experience with QuickBooks Desktop before coming to Goshen. And it was, I mean, mostly just did like invoices and payments and coding and stuff like that there, but it was completely different than QuickBooks Online. So when I came to Goshen, I started learning QuickBooks Online. I was like, oh, okay, this is a new train of thought. So it took me a little bit to get used to it, but it was not too difficult since I had the prior background knowledge of a little bit of it, but I didn't have any of the knowledge of like the accounting principles. So that's where Katie came in and she was really helpful, is just kind of going through and saying, okay, like what she did earlier with the reports, like when you code this goes to this report and this report shows this, and it shows this is what portrays your finances and where you're at. So that was kind of a lot, like debits and credits and just learning all that lingo and all of the theory and concepts there. That was a lot for me. It was something that I took really good notes on so that I could review and come back later and say like, okay, like this is what Katie said. And then I asked good questions too. Like if there was something I didn't understand, I was always like, Katie, explain this in more detail. So that I could get kind of a better, clear understanding of what was going on behind the scenes, so that I wasn't just doing the actual rote work, but I was understanding kind of everything that was going on in the QuickBooks world. So yeah, I don't know, is that kind of what you wanted me to go for, Matt?
Yeah. How do you keep from getting overwhelmed?
I would say staying on top of the coding of the QuickBooks when they come in, and not just leaving it towards the end of the month would be one aspect of not getting overwhelmed. But I think as far as like learning, as I said, just if you've got someone like Katie that's teaching you and you just want to take good notes, you want to ask all the right questions, don't be shy about asking the questions. And I think too, to keep from getting overwhelmed, you just kind of have to take like a little chunk at a time. So Katie was really good about just showing me like, okay, like today we're going to go over this little part, and then next time we're going to go over this little part, and then kind of like a couple of months down the road, kind of putting it all together in one big picture and seeing like, okay, this is how it all fits together. Yeah.
So talking about being overwhelmed, I mean, the reality was, I would do QuickBooks hopefully monthly. And then I was trying to keep up with all the new things that were coming so quickly at me. And when Emily came to work with me, we had not rectified the books for probably 5 months. Okay. Everybody should be going, that's bad, Matt, right? It was terrible. And then Katie came to look at it, and you know what? Katie never judged. Although I'm sure on the inside she was like, oh man, I'm not sure I want to work with this group. But she was always extremely professional with us, and so that was great. She made for a great colleague and a great consultant to support us. I certainly put us in a pretty bad situation, and I think that we found our way out of that hole. Literally, I would talk about seeing the light at the end of the tunnel all the time. Like, do you see the light at the end of the tunnel yet? And Emily was charged with kind of doing the day-to-day activity on this work, and so we found our way out of it. Now we're closing our books monthly and running reports and things like that. I guess my question for you, Katie, is how do you approach a situation like that? What was going through your head when you looked at my books, and how did you remain professional without just like chastising me? Because I'm sure you were thinking it on the inside.
Well, I'm kind of an accounting nerd, and whenever there's a cleanup project, to me, it's similar to like doing a Sudoku or maybe not a crossword puzzle, but something along that, like a puzzle to figure out. And so whenever there's a cleanup project or, something where the modules are being used a little bit differently than they should be, honestly, it's fun for me. It's not overwhelming. I love what I do. And so that's how I would say I keep from being overwhelmed or anything. It's just, I really enjoy it.
I know we have a bunch of questions, but I also questions that we ask for one another, but I see a bunch of questions coming in, and I haven't read through all 21 of them that I haven't read yet, but I have seen a handful of them. First question, and I think it's a simple one. What's the difference between Quicken and QuickBooks?
So Quicken, to my understanding, is used more regularly for like personal finances. I believe that in Quicken, there's modules that you can like link to investments, but I'm not 100% sure what all the features.
Is it the same company? I feel like I should know that, but I've never seen the word Quicken with regards to like QuickBooks business. So QuickBooks is mostly a business application, right?
I would say so. And I believe both of them are Intuit companies, but I'm not 100% on that.
There's a lot of questions in the chat about connecting checking accounts and whether you should do that or not. What are some concerns people should have with regards to that? I mean, I feel like I just went all in and never looked back. Instead, I'm going to figure this out, hell or high water, we're going to make this work. And I've never looked back. It's great, but what are some thoughts you have about that?
So I would say absolutely connect the checking accounts, connect the credit card accounts. There are some pitfalls I think that people run into when they first started using QuickBooks. I'll just give a few examples. Let's say and actually maybe I'll share my screen again and I can show you things as we're going along so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so in the banking module, when you're coding transactions, let's say, for example, there's, we're back to this A rental. Let's say this is actually, let's say this is a loan that you've received. It's a common pitfall that someone wouldn't know where to code a loan. And so they would code it to the income statement. They'd code it as income, and a loan is not income. It's supposed to stay on your balance sheet. So I would say that would be a very common mistake, is like coding loans to the balance sheet or to the income statement. I think people improperly code credit cards and credit card payments, specifically because, and QuickBooks is actually getting better and better about this, but like if you think about, you've got a checking account and a credit card account linked to QuickBooks, and so the transaction where you paid the credit card ends up on your checking register here, but it also ends up on your credit card register. And so a lot of times people will end up duplicating. They'll code it on this side and QuickBooks wouldn't have recognized it. So they end up coding it twice. And then you end up with these really bizarre credit card balances because of that. So I would say that's a very common one. QuickBooks is trying really hard to like make it seamless so that doesn't happen, because so many people had so much trouble with it. And so like now and I don't see it like every time, but like oftentimes it'll say matched to credit card payment, yada, yada, yada. And so then like if you code it on one, it'll match it to the other. Some other common pitfalls I would say are that, let's say someone has a loan payment that they're making. They might not know that they actually have to split that payment between interest and principal. So like, let's say that this one was actually a loan payment. In this case, the proper way to get in there is you'd split it, and you'd pick the category of whatever it is, the interest on one, and you put the interest here, and then you pick the loan on the other, and you put the loan there. That would be another common pitfall. I would say people very frequently will accidentally edit transactions that are in a closed period. I don't know, what does that answer your question of like what are like some sort of the
I think
venues
so.
to limit the checking account? Okay.
I want to jump into some questions I'm seeing here, and people are answering in the chat about why QuickBooks, why not Wave or FreshBooks. And I know you're all QuickBooks Online. That is your consulting practice. That's what you do. But I'm certainly you get these questions. When we talked about this the other day, QuickBooks can be expensive. It's something I pay a bit more because I do the payroll function. But why is QuickBooks a good, and why is it not perhaps the right choice for some people?
So I think it's very expensive. Even the most simple version of QuickBooks, which I've been using for my personal finances since like 2009. And I think it started out, it was like maybe $10 or $15 a month, and now it's $30 a month. And that's like the bare bones. You get the reporting features, but you don't get a lot of the other functionality. I'd have to look and see what the subscription, but I think the QuickBooks Plus without payroll is $85 a month. I don't quote me on that. I think you'd have to go and look at just the QuickBooks homepage to see what the different subscription levels, but I mean, that's expensive. And so I would say would be the main drawback in my opinion. As far as QuickBooks versus other accounting software, I have used Xero a little bit in the past, but as Matt said, I'm like all in on QuickBooks. I keep up on the training and keep my certification. So I'm sure that the other software is probably just as good. It's just that's not my focus, I would say.
I can say another thing that I like about QuickBooks, and I should have started with this. This is probably one of the main things that I'm doing is I'm tracking my invoices I'm generating. And I say but now really it's Emily's doing most of that work. And so we can see when we generated the invoice. Now there's a lot of other functionality I don't use. I just save it as a PDF and then I email it to my clients and then they pay it, versus printing it, which is what I might have done once upon a time, or having it automatically sent to an email address, which I've tried. I feel like I don't have the personalization of that. That's how I use it. It's not very complicated to do that. Did you want to generate? You want to generate an invoice for us, Katie, in this module? Show people how that looks, and then I know a lot of people have questions and they probably want to jump in and they're waiting until I stop recording. We'll stop in a little bit so that we can jump in and have 20 minutes or something like that to talk about all the things. Go ahead, Katie.
So I would say before I talk about generating an invoice, I would have to bring up a concept of how the invoicing module works in QuickBooks. So those of you that are maybe not familiar with a chart of accounts in QuickBooks, or just a chart of accounts in general, this is the list of every account that you have to choose from. It starts with the balance sheet accounts, then it gets down into income accounts, it gets down into expense accounts, etc. The way that the invoicing module works in QuickBooks is it's not a direct link between the actual invoice and the chart of accounts. Let's say if you were not using the invoicing module and you just coded a deposit when it came in and you're like, okay, that was sale of product income, and you just code it directly to the income statement. That's not how the invoicing module works. The invoicing module is sort of, there's an added feature where you link the invoice to an item and then the item links to the chart of accounts. So if I go in, I can show you in settings. I'm going to look at, well, it's the products and services in particular that would be the link between the invoicing and the income statement. So as you can see in this particular company, this is a landscaping company, here's gardening. So whenever I go and I look at this, gardening is not actually on the chart of accounts. This is an extra layer. So, okay, when I go to invoice, I want to invoice for this weekly gardening service. But that actually, I have to link it to the chart of accounts. So here I see, okay, I'm going to link it to landscaping services. So whenever I go in and I'm going to create an invoice, and there's a million ways to do anything in QuickBooks. You can go in through different modules. I'm just going to show you from this plus new. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to go to invoice. And on the invoice, let's say, it doesn't matter, I'll just pick any customer here. Okay, Mimi's Bird Sanctuary. So here, it's not asking me to link to the chart of accounts. It's asking me to link to a product or service that then in turn is linked to the chart of accounts. So that was gardening. And there's that weekly gardening service. Okay, so in this example, let's say we did really well and we got $100,000 for gardening. Okay, that was on 8/10. So then I save and close. I could save and send. I could email it directly to my client from there. And if I've got the credit card module linked up, then they can pay via credit card or bank transfer. Obviously, there's a fee associated with that, but let's just save and close. Okay, so then I go back to my profit and loss statement, and I want to know where that ended up. As we saw, there, gardening is not one of the categories on the chart of accounts. Landscaping service is, because it's linked and behind the scenes to the invoicing module. So then I can drill in and go back to the classic view because that's what I like to look at. All right, there it is. There's that $100,000 in landscaping services. So I would say that's one of the main things to understand about the invoicing module in QuickBooks and how there is this sort of intermediary. And the reason that they do that is because now I can pull other reports by product and service, and I can get a robust picture of that I couldn't get if I just like linked it directly to landscaping services as a deposit. So like when I go back into my reports, I'm like, okay, I want to know how much I spent on landscaping services. That's obviously not on my income statement because it's not one of my chart of accounts. But if I go and I look at sales by product service summary, these are all the product services. This is the only one that obviously has been created in this sample company. And here I can see, oh, gardening, that's this. So does that make sense? Is that
I think it makes sense. Terry wants to open a landscaping company now that she's figured this out. She likes the revenue, maybe perhaps.
yeah.
I'm gonna throw it back to Emily, just for last couple questions to her, and then I want to open it up to everybody. I want to give Emily a chance to talk a little bit. So Emily, how much time are you spending in this, and how effective do you think QuickBooks is for thinking about kind of how we operate? What are your thoughts on QuickBooks with regards to that? Now, just for point of reference, don't get overwhelmed when she answers this question. She's supporting 11 professionals and a pretty big $1 million a year project, so it's a little bit different than what it'll be for you. But Emily, talk a little bit about your experiences and the amount of time it takes for you to do your work.
Yeah, sure. I would say on an average week when I'm not doing like 30, 40 invoices or I'm not closing the month out, I probably spend around five-ish hours on QuickBooks. I would say maybe at the end of the month, if I'm closing the month out and I'm doing all the reconciliations and reporting, or if I'm invoicing a bunch of clients, obviously that takes a lot of time too. You can maybe count on maybe double that. And what was your second question, Matt?
How effective is it for you to understand what's happening with the operation? I mean, or I know that's kind of a question for me too, but I don't know to what degree you're thinking about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think it's very important. And I kind of, to what Katie said before too, I kind of enjoy that piece a little bit too. I like the details. I like knowing the numbers and figuring out the puzzle too. So I definitely think it's important for me to be able to understand kind of what's going on, especially because now that like I understand more of the background of it, I can come to Matt with less questions. I can just make decisions and say like, okay, well, this is how this is going to be coded, or this is how this is going to be done. And I don't have to bother Matt with every little single thing. And I'm sure he appreciates that a little bit. And so, yeah, I just think that, and then there's like, I was gonna say that there's like, I saw some of the questions, there's about receipts, how those come in, and we might get to those or not, but I would say one of my favorite, I know you didn't ask this, Matt, but one of my favorite features of QuickBooks is we spend like multiple thousands of dollars on Amazon each year. And so you have like the Amazon app that pulls in all of your purchases from Amazon, and it pulls in all those receipts from Amazon, and it makes my job so much easier, like 1,000 times easier. So that would be my favorite feature.
So last thoughts on this, and then I see a hands raised. We're gonna get to that in just a second. With regards to the expense, if I was starting out right now, I'd probably be tempted to go with a FreshBooks or a less expensive operation. I originally did start with QuickBooks for the PC. What is it called? What do you call it, Emily? It was QuickBooks
Desktop.
Desktop. That's right. And it was like $150, right? One payment. And then I added the payroll module on because I wanted to pay myself and I didn't want to have to figure out how to pay all the taxes, do all the things. And I didn't want to pay somebody else to do that. It just seemed like it made sense. And then they moved me into the QuickBooks Online. And I was like, well, I guess it's the cost of doing business. And then frankly, it made much more sense as the business kind of picked up. When I had more clients, I was generating invoices. It just became easier and easier. But I mean, frankly, if I started over again, I'd probably be thinking against it until I grew bigger. But then I'd probably have a lot of learning pains when I had to transition from something else into this, because this is a better, more robust setup for a bigger, more than a one-person operation. So that was my thoughts. But the invoicing is great, and the payroll is great too. I do all my own payroll, 100%. We do it through ACH, and none of the accountants have said I've doing anything terribly wrong. So I guess we're okay with that. But I mean, I give an endorsement to QuickBooks, and if I were getting involved with QuickBooks specifically from fresh, I'd probably find like a support person, like a Katie or whomever you have in your community that you want to work with, that could support me, take a look at my books on a monthly basis at first, give me some training, and then look at my books on a regular basis, like once I feel like I've got the ball rolling, then I'd want them to take a look every 3 months. Then perhaps this is also somebody who could do your taxes in your community, who can also do that. So particularly if I'm starting out, this is what I tell my colleagues who are just starting out with accounting: have somebody take a look at all the reports that you're filing on a regular basis, and take a look at your books and support you and tell you what you're doing right, and more importantly, telling you what you're doing wrong so that you can correct it, so that you can get, because you don't want to get in a situation where you're getting, letters in the mail from your state or from the federal government saying you're not paying them the right amount, and then you have to start paying penalties. So that's why I use QuickBooks, and that's why it's been helpful for me. It's offloaded a lot of my worries about how we operate into a system that seems to work. And I'm even happier now that I've got Emily, who can think about this on a regular basis, because it's not my strength. This is not an area that I want to spend a lot of time thinking about. And obviously that was the case because I got so far behind, which is why we brought Katie in. So I'm going to stop the recording here in just a minute, but I do want to say thank you to Katie and Emily for coming on today, and for all the things you guys always do for us, and for Goshen Consulting, because it is, we are aware of how great we're doing and what we should be doing because of good reporting, like financial reporting, and we wouldn't know about that if it wasn't for the two of you. So thank you very much for that every day, and also for talking about it and being vulnerable to a crowd of people who want to learn a lot about it. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop recording.